In this section, you will hear a conversation between two colleagues discussing a work project. First, you have half a minute to look at questions 1-5. Now listen and answer questions 1-5.
All right, Sarah. As you know, we have a tight deadline for this project at the end of the month, so we need to plan it carefully.
You're right, I've been thinking about that, and I suggest we break this project into 3 main stages: a preparatory phase, then phase 1, and finally phase 2, with clear deadlines for each one.
With the need to complete this quickly, that sounds like a good approach. Can you tell me more about the specifics?
The preparatory phase is the simplest. We just need to find a suitable, spacious location to do our planning.
And we also have to decide on the necessary equipment. Remember the last time when we didn't have enough projectors for the presentations? That caused a lot of wasted time.
Yes, that was a problematic start. That's why I've allotted just 3 days for phase 1 after the preparatory work.
Phase 1 will involve creating the actual plans. We'll need Jenna and Marco to help us with that.
But not Susan, she's too busy to be part of the team right now, even though I'd like her involvement.
Okay, let's just bring in Fred instead. He may not be as experienced as Greg, but he can handle this phase.
Then we move straight into phase 2, which is all about collecting, organizing, analyzing, and preparing the final report.
Can we really complete that in 5 days?
I think 6 days is a more realistic timeline, just to be safe.
6 days? That's almost a week. Do we have that much time available?
Yes, we do, and with the right team, 6 days should be enough to get the job done.
Who will be the key people for this final phase? Arthur and Rob, right?
No, Arthur has other commitments, and Rob is on leave, so Mike will be the main person responsible for this part. He's done similar work before, so it should go smoothly, but he may need some additional support with the detailed tasks.
Okay, I can arrange for Leo to provide some time and advice. He's very capable, especially under pressure. Sounds like we've got everything sorted out. Great work, Sarah. This report should be ready on time.
Before listening to the rest of the conversation, you have half a minute to look at questions 6-10. Now listen and answer questions 6-10.
Sarah, you've done a good job with the overall timeline, but what about the specific details?
What kind of details do you mean?
Like the information gathering process. Will we use questionnaires again, like last time?
I was thinking of using the internet to ask people for their views, but sometimes you get silly responses that way. I think the best approach is to ask people directly.
Okay, but that will take longer. We might even have to do some work at home.
No, I don't think so, as long as we stay back after work for some meetings.
That's better than coming in early. No one functions well in the morning. The final report will also need at least 2 appendices.
And we'll have to attach a small booklet with printouts from the relevant foreign websites.
That will take even more time. Are you sure we can meet the deadline?
Yes, I've planned it all out. Phase 1 should be done by the 5th, leaving Phase 2 to start around the 8th or 9th. There's a public holiday on the 10th, so we can submit everything by the 15th, and then celebrate on the 25th when the design division approves it.
You're assuming the design division will approve this, which is not a guarantee.
Come on, Alex, be positive. I'm sure it will be approved, and I'm already planning the celebration.
All right, what's on the agenda?
We don't want a party in the office, and it's hard to find a time that works for everyone's personal lives. So I thought we'd just buy nice, expensive gifts for everyone who participated and give them out here at the office.
That sounds fine, but make sure they're not too expensive. The budget department won't approve high costs.
Don't worry, I know how much I can get away with.
All right, I'll leave that with you.
That's the end of part 1. You have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to part 2.
In this section, you will listen to a maintenance employee with a university administrator about recent storm damage to the main building. First, you will have time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Hello. I was asked to inform you about the extent of the damage to the main building, caused by the recent storm.
Okay, I understand. I assume most of the damage is just to the main building?
Yes, that's correct, since the building is quite old. However, fortunately, the damage is minor, and all of it can be fixed in one day, given that we have a team of 5 people.
What will you be working on first? I know you start at 8 in the morning.
That's right. And we were going to remove the fallen tree, but we've been told there are exams that morning, and I'm sure the sound of the saws and other equipment will disturb the students. So instead, we'll repair the leaky roof. That's a 4-hour job, as it involves significant restoration, not like fixing broken windows, which can be done fairly quickly.
So you'll fix the broken window after that, starting around midday?
We could do that, but since we'll be working in the ceiling, it makes more sense to remove the bird's nest there first. It's a small task, but will require crawling inside the ceiling cavity, which is not an easy job, so that will take about an hour. But this is good, since by that time the exams should be over, and we can address the fallen tree after our 1-hour lunch break. Dealing with that tree will be quite noisy, but it will be finished by 3 o'clock. Some of our staff will then leave to fix things at another site. An office nearby needs a new window, but 2 of us, including myself, will remain here to paint over that discolored wall in your office.
Oh good, it looks so terrible right now.
Well, we'll certainly make it look good as new, and in the last hour of our workday, we'll fix the issue with the wiring. Apparently, the power doesn't reach one of the classrooms. Probably some water has gotten into the fuse box, so we'll just replace a few wires and clean up the moisture, and it should be working properly again.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have half a minute to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
I appreciate the hard work you and your team are doing here, but I have a small request.
What is that?
You mentioned you will paint the back wall in my office. Will it be the same color as it was?
Yes, we plan to make it a clean white color.
Actually, I'd prefer it to be yellow to match the furniture. The furniture is orange, but I believe yellow will complement it well. Can you do that?
Absolutely. We can make it yellow. It's definitely a nicer color than plain white, or even the blue I have in my kitchen at home. We'll also leave you the paint can for any future touch UPS, or if the stain comes back. I'll place it in the garden shed next to the main classroom. By the way, regarding the birds in the ceiling, I discovered there are baby birds up there. We can relocate them to a nearby wildlife reserve, which isn't far from here.
Or maybe we could give them to one of our teachers. I know someone who can take care of them.
I think the wildlife reserve is a better choice since the staff there are experienced with animals. Regarding the fallen tree, we'll cut it into smaller pieces for firewood for my house, so it won't go to waste. Although it will produce some smoke, I have a special permit for my fireplace, so there shouldn't be any complaints. I also noticed the university has a garden bin for smaller debris like leaves, sticks, and bark. Oh. We can dispose of such materials there, ensuring they are recycled, which is more environmentally friendly. So, you can be sure we will use that bin.
That's the end of part 2. You have half a minute to check your answers. Now, turn to part 3. In this section, you will hear a conversation between 3 students discussing the different courses they attend. First, you have half a minute to look at questions 21-26. Now listen and answer questions 21-26.
Well, guys, we're nearly done with our second semester here. How do you feel about the courses we're taking?
Overall, I think they're pretty good, except for social history. It seems a bit vague to me.
I agree, and the lecturer's way of teaching is really boring.
I feel the same, though I find the textbook more engaging. It's called Welfare State. The subtitle is an analysis of social progress in the 20th century.
Yes, Welfare State is a decent book, but it's huge. It has 458 pages.
True, it's too lengthy to read easily, even though some parts are well written.
Exactly. And compared to the Cultural Studies textbook, what's its name again?
I think it's Interviews.
No, Interviews was for Media Studies, which we finished last semester. The one for Cultural Studies is In Perspective.
Right, you're correct. In Perspective. Its subtitle is a study of social groups. It's somewhat interesting, don't you think?
Only mildly interesting, like the subject itself, which covers a lot of topics, but the book oversimplifies things too much.
I agree. The constant oversimplification annoyed me. Life is more complex than that book suggests.
Yes, but what you call oversimplifying might actually be clarifying for others. Take government in action, for example. Some might say it simplifies things too, but it has to in order to present a clear view of a complicated subject.
Government in Action. Which course is that for?
It's for political theory.
I can't stand politics. That's why I dislike the active leadership course as well. Most of the content in the political theory book is based on the American system since it's written by Americans. It doesn't apply to us.
I agree. It's not relevant at all since our government follows the Westminster system.
Yes, I see how that could be a problem.
Before listening to the rest of the conversation, you have half a minute to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
It looks like we all have some complaints about our textbooks, but we also appreciate certain aspects of our subjects. David, which subject do you like the most?
I'm not entirely sure. I enjoy political theory, but
For me, cultural studies is the best, even more than political theory, which I do like, just not as much.
why do you prefer that, Steve? I was considering social history as the top choice.
Social history is good, but I prefer cultural studies because it's more relevant to today's society.
But social history is relevant too, and I appreciate the historical aspect, which other subjects lack. Even political theory only touches on history briefly and narrowly, so social history is the most fulfilling for me. What about you, Susan?
I agree that social history is very good, but political theory is actually the best. Every human system is essentially about politics, so even if some details seem irrelevant, the main idea is still very important.
Oh, Susan, you must be joking. Let's ask Olive. She's right over there. Olive, which subject do you think is the best?
That's a tough one. I'm really into culture, so cultural studies is my favorite, but I'm also politically active and want a career in politics, so I'd choose political theory.
I can't believe it. Even with that irrelevant textbook?
Don't mind him, Olive. You're entitled to your own opinion.
That's the end of part 3. You have half a minute to check your answers. In this section, you will listen to a lecture about the movement of the population towards cities. First, you will have time to look at questions 31 to 32. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 32.
Today, we will discuss the shift of populations from rural areas to cities. In the past, farms were small and required a lot of manual labor. They needed many workers to manage a variety of products, such as livestock like cows and sheep, and crops like oranges, lemons, and peaches, along with a few chickens for eggs. These workers lived with their families, who needed local services like healthcare and education. Thus, small country towns had bustling commerce, stores, and a vibrant community life with people of all ages. Now, this has dramatically changed. If you visit small towns in most developed countries, you'll often find them looking abandoned and lifeless. Many people have moved to large cities, leaving rural areas with fewer residents and empty town centers. This widespread trend is known as rural flight or rural exodus and has led to several common issues.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have half a minute to look at questions 33 to 35. Now listen and answer questions 33-35.
Today, we'll delve into the reasons behind rural migration, with a primary factor being the industrialization of agriculture. This shift is characterized by two main elements, the first being monoculture farming methods. Essentially, this entails focusing solely on one product for maximum efficiency. For instance, animal farming now predominantly revolves around a single species, such as pigs. This transition also involves economies of scale, where larger quantities of livestock, like 2,000 pigs, are efficiently managed with minimal labor through mechanized processes. Despite potential ethical concerns, the driving force behind this transformation is the pursuit of lower costs and increased profitability within competitive markets. Consequently, these changes have profoundly impacted rural areas, often yielding unfavorable outcomes.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have half a minute to look at questions 36-40. Now listen and answer questions 36-40.
When considering solutions to rural exodus, there are indeed reasons for optimism, particularly as more people experience the downsides of urbanization. Unlike cities, rural areas offer unique advantages, which can be harnessed for revitalization and economic growth. One promising avenue is tourism, where local involvement is crucial for success. Outsiders often lack an understanding of the community dynamics and cultural nuances that make each rural area distinct. For instance, the Daylesford region has leveraged its natural springs to develop a thriving tourist industry centered on health and relaxation, with spas and accommodations nestled in its scenic landscapes. Another approach involves capitalizing on local produce, tapping into the growing demand for fresh, locally sourced food. Many urban dwellers seek alternatives to mass-produced goods and are willing to pay for quality and freshness. To succeed in this endeavor, rural areas must effectively market their unique products. Regions like country Victoria have embraced grape growing and winemaking, attracting tourists with wine-tasting experiences that cater to both domestic and international visitors. Similarly, places like Harcourt, Shepperton, and Mildura have capitalized on their specialties, apples, mature cheeses, and citrus products respectively, to drive economic growth and promote tourism. Through these strategies, rural areas have the potential to thrive once again, offering vibrant and appealing living environments for residents.
That is the end of part 4. You will now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening section.